So welcome back. We have an important topic to discuss, and I will stress the word important. There are fewer of us now, because everybody thinks that cows and cereals need management, but that trees grow alone. And we know, unfortunately, this is not true anymore, and that we need also people in the forest. So it's really important that we're here. And at the same time, the one thing we know is that we do not know. I have taken the time to read all the 3 reports of the International Panel for Climate Change. It's huge reading. And the one common theme is that scientists, climate specialists themselves, so we don't know for sure. We know climate is changing. We know it's going warmer. We know that we have already at least 1.2 degrees Celsius warming, global warming. We know that warming on the ground is at least half a degree Celsius more than global warming, which incorporates oceans. We know from experience, I know from experience, that trees are dying. And I am here to learn. As we always say at ELO, we inherit our forests from our children. And what we would like to add is that the problems of our generation need to be solved by our generation. And therefore, we have to ask ourselves the question as, what kind of forest do we need to meet climate change? And for that purpose, to avoid staying at vague, non-managerial level and address concrete questions from the ground, we have chosen to select this particular scenario, climate scenario, that basically, I won't bore you with the details, but basically what this says is that it's at least as likely as unlikely that we will be around 1.5 degrees Celsius global warming, probably 2 degrees. It may be worse, it's not going to be better, but if we prepare for at least this scenario, we will be better positioned to adjust further if we need. And what I'm expecting from the panelists is concrete answers that can help me make the right decisions in the forest, and as a group to make the right decisions as a society. So I'm very glad to have with us 4 panelists, and I beg you in the audience to prepare your questions, because we'll have more interaction as this morning with you if you like. First, we will have Alessandro Cescatti, who's a senior scientist and the Director for Sustainable Resources in the Joint Research Center at the European Commission. Is at the heart of the scientific debate fueling policy. Then we will have our friend from France, Erwin Ulrich, who's head of the mission to Net Forest to Climate Change, so that we have the French perspective in the context of the French presidency for the EU. Then we will move to the next presidency, and we'll have 2 persons representing what is happening here. One is Tomáš Vrška, who has the double advantage of coming from the academics work, the scientific work, because he works at the Mendel University, and I am on the board with him to try and promote change there. But also he is in charge of the experimental forest. So he's not somebody who only reads and writes books. He reads and writes books with the experience from the ground. Then we have Jiří Svoboda, who is our new president for the Czech Syndicate of Forestry Owners, with whom we're working actively, in particular, on trying to change the legislative framework to promote more diversity in nature management, also meaning more diversity in the way we manage our forests. And then we have the all-important partnership for forestry, which is, what do we do with wood? What kind of wood, what volumes can we produce to still have this beautiful material as a carbon retention and a pleasure promoting resource, represented by Mrs. Joanna Pirinen from Stora Enso, which, as you know, is an active and large investor in the wood industry in the Czech Republic, but not only. So my message to you is that the answer to this question usually is this. Crystal ball, I'll put it there, and hopefully after the discussion we will see a bit more or a bit better through the crystal ball. Floor is yours, Alessandro.
Thank you, Chairman, for the introduction. I start my speech recalling a movie that I guess many of you have seen, The Lord of the Ring, or maybe you have also read the novel, where at a certain point we have these wise ancient trees, the Ents, that were talking and allying with men in the fight against evil. Of course, trees don't talk, but I'm questioning here, what would they say now, if they could? Of course, scientists have tools to understand the language of trees. And our tools are related to checking, for instance, the subtle differences in the color of the leaves, for instance, or in the material that, for instance, in the isotopic composition of the wood, or little signals that tells us how the tree feels and what they are telling us. And the signal we get is that they are facing, I would say, unprecedented challenges. And the challenge is, of course, driven by climate change, and by the rapidity of it. We are targeting this scenario, 2.5, 0.4, with a temperature rise in the order of 2 degrees, but I'm telling you on land, for instance, here, we have seen 2-degree warming just in the last 20 years, so it's 1 degree per decade, which for a tree just extremely difficult to handle, because this temperature change comes together with a change in environmental condition, in particular water availability, because the evaporative demand of the atmosphere is increasing. Technically, we call this parameter VPD, the water pressure deficit, so how much is the evaporative demand of the atmosphere. That is rocketing high. For the tree, this is a major problem because it's drying out the trees. And we can see that from satellite using the spectral bands that look into the water content of the leaves. We can see that throughout Europe. This is happening. And the cascade of the event is pretty clear. We have it very evident here. We have warming, drying, reduced resilience of the tree, which means reduced capacity to withstand changes, increased mortality, reduction of the carbon sink, and eventually, at the end, also, I would say, posing questions about the overall carbon mitigation potential that the forest will have in the future. Will they really meet the target we are putting at them under these serious constraints? Trees will also tell us that in some parts of Europe, there are too many of the same species of the same age. This is a problem. And the problem is that when you have too many trees of the same species of the same age, you have a total synchronicity, we say, in their needs. All the trees, because they are same, they need the same environmental resource at the same time. For instance, they all need water at the same time because they are fundamentally identical individuals. This synchronicity in their needs leads to an increased vulnerability, because if that specific environmental factors, water, for instance, in August, is missing, all the trees will suffer at the same time, leading to an increased probability of having natural disturbances. The Ents in the Lord of the Ring were not only talking, they were also walking, if you remember the movie. And so my second question is, where would the tree go if they could walk? And certainly they will move north, because the temperature increase that we have at the moment here, we have observed in the last 20 years, 1 degree per decade, translated into a gradient in the north-south is 150 kilometers north every decade. It's 15 kilometers north every year. This is where they would need to go to cope with the climate change we are imposing to them. Clearly, trees don't work. And so the problem we have is that the trees that are like spruce, here, already in a part of their climate envelope, we use this definition as scientists, the climate dimensions that allows their life, those trees that are already at the warm edge of it, so they are already close to the warmest climate that they can withstand, they may fall out of it. And what we are seeing at the moment is that 20%, 25% of tree area and biomass of Europe is already outside of the climate envelope of the species which is building it. So this is the problem we have today. And this will become even worse in the future, depending on the climate scenarios we will go after. So how do we adapt now this system? The forest sector is difficult to adapt for a series of reasons. The first is that trees are long-living, so it takes time. They have a lot of inertia. The second problem we have is that we don't really know what will come. Of course, we have scenarios, CP 2.4, 4.5. Which are we going to follow depends on the success of our mitigation efforts, on the behavior of the climate system, on the collective efforts also from other big economies like China and India. So there are a lot of uncertainties of where we'll be heading. So we have to adapt the forest to a climate of the end of the century, if you want, because the tree we are planting now will be close to, let's say, harvesting by the end of the century for a climate that we really don't know what it will be. So, and to do so, we have also to deal with social and cultural, let's say, barriers sometimes, just about which species and where we can plant. The forest that we need, I think scientists pretty agree on that now. They have to be, I would say, more heterogeneous in a broad sense. It's speaking about heterogeneity in tree species, but also in genetic diversity of the same species. It's also about heterogeneity in age, because the concept of heterogeneity, it leads to this asynchronicity in the environmental demands that by itself generates resilience. So we need to go in that direction, to increase diversity, and in doing so, leverage on all the knowledge we have about, for instance, the genetic diversity within the framework of the same species, which is sometimes huge. If you think about species like Scots pine, which is growing from the north of Finland to Spain, there's a huge diversity in their domain. And there is where programs in Europe about the forest genetic diversity are really useful. But we have also to look elsewhere about migrating tree species, because if a tree species has to move 15 kilometers north every year, clearly it cannot do all that route alone. And we have to do that because if we wait for nature to do the job of adapting the forest, it will simply take too long. Forests can adapt, but they cannot adapt and at the same time deliver what we are asking forests to deliver at the moment. And there's such an increased demand on forest services. For all parts of society, everyone wants something from forests. We want biodiversity, conservation, we want carbon storage, we want bioenergy, we want wood for material substitution, and so on and so forth. To maintain this delivery of ecosystem services, we have to facilitate this adaptation process to this impressive speed that we impose through climate change. And the only way to do it is through managing the process. But managing this process means also involving all the actors that have a role into the process, because it's so challenging. On the positive side, what I see is that the reason that in the past has led to sometimes to some harsh confrontation between the various, let's say, stakeholders, organizations around the forest world, industries or owners or environmentalists, about how do we have to manage it and why we manage the forest in a certain direction. In this time of change, against these strong challenges, they are somehow dissolving. That's my feeling, that the differences in the objectives of the various stakeholders are actually becoming smaller and smaller. We are all after the same objective now, which is building resilient forests that can withstand the climate of the next century. And because we are aligned, it can be, a way to try to convert this major challenge we have and the risk coming to it in an opportunity. Because when we are united as society, I think we can do more. Now we are looking at the same objective, which is exactly the one that the chairman was saying before. Giving back to our children the forest that we borrowed from them. And for doing this, I think it's a response, united response from all the actors is actually needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alessandro. And because I'm a practitioner, I know that as the boss, I have to take decisions while not knowing. In the context of uncertainty, I would like to get some guidance, some scientific guidance from you. You mentioned a pole, North Pole, the poleward shift. Yeah? I have in my head some indication that 1 degree Celsius more is the equivalent of 100 meters altitude down and requires 40 milliliters more water for the same tree to survive. What do you think of that kind of practical guidance?
They are actually, okay. They are almost optimistic, I would say. In reality, in altitude, the gradient is even more than 100 meters per degree. And that is reality. It's 0.6 or so per 100 meters, the gradient, and 150 kilometers north if you look in that dimension. So it's a huge shift. And then you have the water problem, you said, that is not so directly related with precipitation, that probably is not really going down so much. Actually, in some part of Europe will actually increase, but to the increasing demand of evaporation, as I was saying. Clearly, we have species in Europe that are at the moment at the wrong place. They cannot deal with the climatic environment in which they are. And this need to move them, it's frightening, because moving trees takes time. It's much more complicated than adapting in the agricultural sector, where you can change a crop in 1 year. Changing a tree takes decades to a century.
If I forget about my heart a bit for a moment, and I carry my pure business hat, and I look at my forest, I sort of think, air is for free, CO2 is for free, actually the more the merrier, light is for free, water is for free. The only thing that costs money and which I should invest is soil. And what you're basically saying is a bit the same as me. We talk about trees. Tree is a result. We should talk about the environment in which the tree will be happy. And therefore, soil and water retention is actually also extremely important. Hence, remembering that for the same tree, we need 40 millimeters more water per degree Celsius for the tree to be happy. Yeah. And that is why I'm also very keen on having Tomáš Vrška's perspective. What, from your perspective as a scientist, as a practitioner, working in the Czech Republic, but also active in ProSilva for closer to nature forestry management, how do you react to this whole debate about I'm sorry, Tomáš, I forgot to give the word to our French partners first. We're under French presidency. I'm half French, so I should not have forgotten. My apologies. This is not an example of French politeness. So again, my apology. I do know that Erwin Ulrich is more of the Alsatian or Lorrain name, so you must have personal experience, Mr. Ulrich, from forestry management. It's more sort of Mitteleuropa than classical French, but we'd be very interested in having your perspective as to how France is suffering from climate change and how you plan to adapt the French state forest, the Office National des Forêts, to what's coming our way. Thank you.
Yes, hello. Thank you very much for your invitation, and I'm glad to be able to participate this way to your forum. Sorry not to be with you personally, but I'm glad to be able to speak to you. I'm not French, I'm Austrian, but I'm working since more than 30 years for the French State Forest Company. So this is why my name is so strange for you. Let me first tell you what I'm doing. My function is to be piloting on a national level the adaptation of forests to climate change in the French State Forest Company. Just to give you some overview what our company is, we are approximately 8,500 employees. we manage about 11 million hectares of forests, and 4.6 million hectares of these are in metropolitan France. We manage 1.8 million hectares of state forests and 2.9 million hectares of communal forests. And there are some 15,000 communities which have forests in France. The wood production is about 15 million cubic meters per year. So what about the type of forests we want to follow with the climate change scenarios, RCP 4.6 or even more? We have prepared for many years for these questions. And we have, since 2021 and 2020-21, decided to go in action. We want to continue to guarantee everywhere multifunctional forests, because they correspond to our forestry culture and to the society wishes. But in saying this, we are facing a lot of challenges because we know that our current forests are increasingly fragilized by the ever-strong climate change impacts. So we have decided to act, and I give you here only a few examples of our National Forest Adaptation Strategy, which was published in September 2021. One of the most important points, and this is the first point of our strategy, is that we will re-establish balanced wild game populations by doing very strong decisions. We want to reach this in the next 3 to 5 years. It will be a hard fight, but we hope to have the right decisions. We have started to create much more mixed forests with 2 to 3 main tree species, which are already now a little bit better, I mean, for the future climate, better adapted to the future climate. We will use much more new tree species or proveniences also from abroad, Europe or overseas, many of them in a nationwide management experiments. We have already started these experiments with more than 200, about 2 hectare plots, and we will follow these for the next 30 to 50 years in order to decide whether they can be in future some of the main tree species we will use in France. We will preserve also biodiversity in all our actions. This is a very challenging action. We will develop the mosaic forest concepts. So what does this mean? What does the mosaic forest contain in future? It will contain regular high forests and irregular forest stands. It will contain a strongly increasing proportion of mixed forests, natural regeneration and plantation plots, micro-reserves of aging and senescent stands, zones for the preservation of biodiversity, strict biological reserves, wetlands, copies with standard stands, simple copies, and also trees for the future experimental plantations, which I mentioned just before, and of course recreational areas, etc. So the diversity of mosaics will depend on the forest region. As you know, France is a quite big country with a lot of climatic and site condition differences, very strong differences. So the mosaic will get more and more visible in the next 30 to 50 years. You cannot plan it. It will be an iterative adaptation process with the hypothesis that the diversity of approaches will lead to the adaptation success, which means more resilient forests. The landscape diversity will be a function of smaller management units, the creation of more mixed forests, taking into account biodiversity, forest tiebacks, and the management decisions they are leading to. There will be a lot of opportunism. We cannot plan everything. There will be a natural fragmentation, sometimes by obligation, or perhaps with the time even more often by obligation. There will be local regional differences. That means a puzzle of variable surfaces. The adaptation process will be a function of the total closed areas in each region, the size of individual forests, the opportunity offered by possible future evolutions of the stands, climate change impacts, which we cannot foresee, of course, the needs of local and regional society. There must be an equilibrium with the society in each region. We want to maintain natural regeneration whenever it makes sense, which means that we will analyze which of these are resilient tree species to the future climate. We will make a lot of experiments in silviculture with much more mixed forests, as I mentioned already, with assisted migration, with mainly new tree species in proveniences in trees for the future plantations. Currently, some 30 new tree species and proveniences have been planted in more than 250 forest plots. We will also use nursery stands in which we regenerate as soon as the trees are producing seeds in order to profit from the genetic heterogeneity and adaptation capacity they contain. And we are learning a lot in the last years of this capacity of this genetic capacity. So it was just in a few words, some of the ideas that we have. And I would like to finish telling you that our strategy has more than 100 actions, and it is quite impossible here to present them all to you. But you have a little example, some examples. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. This is proof of what we are saying, that we need to be humble. We know we don't know, and we need to be humble. And being humble in ecological terms is called biodiversity, and in managerial terms is called flexibility. I have a question to the two of you and to the other panelists, more precisely. Resilient species. We can have a mixed forest, but if it's the wrong species, they'll die anyway. So it's actually more important to talk and test what we need as resilient species than actually talking about the management style afterwards. So maybe you could give us examples of, I don't know, Alsace-Lorraine, which is closer to Central Europe. What are the indications of the right mix, or some concrete examples from France where you could give us a sense for what is the right mix of species for the future?
They can be very variable. For example, we know that in the next 30 to 50 years, beech will be very much in trouble all over France. So we are creating already now, we are trying to change it by plantation with Quercus robur or Quercus petrea, depending on the regions. And we mix it, for example, with different Arza species or with pine, so that we will have, at least in the meantime, I mean, not for the real adaptation for 50 or 60 or 100 years, we have at least meantime solutions, because we don't know where this climate will go, so we can only get step by step. And we have to wait what the species like Cedrus, like Calocedrus, that we have planted, what their answers will be, how they will behave in the next 30 to 50 years, before we can decide as forest managers whether these can be species that we can use in 50 or 60 years more broadly. We have no knowledge currently, for example, to use these species in mixed stands. So we test them currently in small plots for 2 hectares, monospecifically.
Tomáš, if I may ask you, how do you react from your perspective as a scientist, as a practitioner, and as somebody who is involved not only in the Czech Republic, but the European perspective under the ProSilva school of thought?
Yes, I agree. It's okay, this microphone. I agree. This what Erwin mentioned, because the Central Europe is a very good example for this climate change in the forests. Our university forest enterprise is on the border between the typical temperate climate and the Pannonian climate, and the South Moravian region is now occupied mostly by insect or flora from Pannonia, and these ecosystems are changed, and it is the question why not to start to plant these Pannonian tree species. So we started the same examples like Erwin presented. We plant now on the first forest stands the Pannonian oak species like Quercus pubescens, Quercus virgiliana, etc. And we plant, for example, the other tree species from Balkane, and I think this is necessary because the shift of the climate conditions is faster than we expected. Yeah.
And if I can share a bit of a frustration with you, my experience as a steward of a family forest is that the most conservative people are not the foresters, as I would expect it. No, we are not particularly adaptable, typically, as a culture. We know that. But I find that it's sometimes even harder to fight with the conservative members of the environmental world. And that, to give you a precise example, I have to fight with the environmental agency in our region to convince them to let me plant a bit of oak so that nature can tell us what she thinks about it. And the reason is because my grandmother and her foresters did a good job, and therefore our forest is protected. It even survived the Nazi invasion and the communist regime because of the people who she and her forester educated and stayed on site and protected what was there. And now the environmental agency tells us, but oak does not belong here. Your job is to bring forest back to its former state. And I say, former? When? Yesterday? 100 years ago? 1,000 years ago? 30,000 years ago, we had 1.5 degrees Celsius in our region. That's proven by paleoclimate science. And there was pine. So should I cut everything and replace my pine? And why are you looking backwards? I need you. You should be the one telling me to plant oak. I need you to look forward, because climate is changing forward, not backward. And we therefore need a mindset change. And we need a change of the environment, and in particular of the regulations and the law. And I will now switch to Czech, if you may. Takže budu teď switchnout, jak se říká česky.
I shall switch to Czech now, and I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Svoboda as the chairman of the SVOL, the Association of Forest Owners. You, an expert in forest management. I think there are 8 different divisions that you manage and a lot of experience. What is it exactly that we need to protect forests? Thank you for giving me the floor. Good afternoon, everybody. As has been mentioned, I am a practitioner, so I may take a slightly different perspective on all the issues that have been outlined. We have certain wishes we'd like to see happening, but there are very strict limitations imposed on us. For instance, the environmental protection authorities would be, in the Czech Republic, considered one of the strictest of this kind in the world. We're also limited by various other factors that play a role, such as insufficient ways to fence off certain areas that needs to be protected within the forest in order to protect them from wild game. We have the bark beetle infestations, and we have also windfalls, very strong winds. We have a very regular winds on a weekly basis, essentially, during winter, but a lot of windfalls. And on top of that, we have the disturbance of the climate patterns, apart from the very fact of there being less and less rainfall and the temperatures going up. So what is it that we should do? Should we forest and reforest areas with species that would solve the problem? Well, yes, we're trying to find ways to do it. But we are, as I said, limited by the regulations. For instance, the Act on Forests in the Czech Republic is then corroborated in the bylaws that tell us exactly what we can do and we can't do. And it may well be down to a short list of 4 to 5 species that can be planted there. So that by definition narrows down the possibilities that we can actually consider to be viable options. So we need to put the responsibility and the decision-making power down to the level where it belongs. It needs to be a very specific, down-to-earth, very localized decision. Let's say, okay, oak shouldn't be planted there, spruce should not be planted over there. Well, yes, generally I understand the regulations, but then there are certain exceptions and very local conditions. There's a whole lot of influences that you need to take into account, and if we can't to prepare the conditions for the water managers so that they can decide with the experience and the knowledge and good faith that this is the right species for this particular stand, then it won't work. So this is what we need to start with.
And we have the ambition to, again, open a discussion on the forestry legislation, and we have to create space for forest managers. And then we can start for searching for solutions. And we can only envy our French colleagues that they can work with so many species, and that the ONF is the leader testing out and piloting out different species. And the French climate is probably less challenging than what we're facing now.
So I fully sympathize with what you said. So the fact that sometimes environmental agencies are the most conservationist with an attitude of museum type of forestry, which is perfectly fine under stable conditions. But when the conditions are changing so rapidly as they are changing now, we should have a broader perspective, as you said, across century and millennia. And we start from a flora in Europe which is really poor in species. From the very beginning, compared to North America and Asia, this is due to the configuration of Europe, to the Mediterranean Sea, to the Ice Age. We are missing, for instance, several genus of conifers that are present everywhere in the world. So we start from a little pool of species, and we should be flexible enough to understand that emergencies need solutions that are also brave. We can base, anyway, the selection of species also on science. Now, I just give you, for instance, a report that has been just out from the European Commission about the distribution of 3 species, which are data sets built on the modeled climate envelope of the species, which project them till the end of the century. And it's very important to look forward when we think about the species. We should not plant the species that are okay with the current climate, because we will be late. If we try to run behind climate change, we will be late with trees because they grow so slow. We have to anticipate it. Of course, it's difficult because we don't know exactly where we will be, but we have to do this effort. Now try to use that crystal ball and try to build for the future. Trying to bring also all the elements of the society together through information and science and so on.
I see that Mr. Ulrich has asked for the floor.
Yeah, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me.
Very well.
I wanted thank you. I wanted just to answer to our Czech colleague. We have also in France very strict regulation on tree species use, very strict. But the forestry has discussed in between 2019 and 2020, the whole forestry, about the problem of climate change and what we are facing. And they have been able to negotiate a sort of window which allows the forestry, not only ONF, not only the state forest company, but also private foresters to experiment different kind of tree species. But this experiment must be supervised by researchers, by research and development departments. And they must be in a web cartography and so on and so on. This is, we are already, just to answer to my colleague from GRC, we are already behind climate change. We are already running behind. It's already on the way. So what we are doing now is running behind. So thank you very much.
I think you have a huge support in the room. It's about testing and learning. And I have a bit of a difficult question. France has the presidency of the European Union. Czech Republic is taking over. Afterwards, we have Sweden. These are 3 countries. Afterwards, we have Spain. So we could say 4 countries who have a very keen interest in forestry for various reasons. Of course, cork for wine bottles is not the same as Norway spruce for furniture. And we also know that we need commonality. But on the one hand, forestry is not part of the EU agenda. It's interacting with many of the EU agenda topics such as biodiversity or climate change, but it's not part of the mandate of the European Union according to treaties. But we need commonality, and we as practitioners have the impression that a lot of rules are sliding into practice through the European Commission, and we will end up having a common European policy without us really having discussed it. So we know we want commonality, but we're not sure that the commonality that is actually happening is the right one. And secondly, beyond commonality, you've heard it, we need subsidiarity. We need the local chap or girl who owns that tree and that forest, who manages that tree and that forest, to be the one deciding and being responsible for his or her choices and mistakes. And out of this portfolio of solution, rich portfolio of individual solutions, we will find the right one. Nature will prove to us what is the right one. So to the panelists, I would ask to us, what is your assessment? Have we found, or how can we find the right balance between commonality and subsidiarity? Tough question. Does anybody want to answer? Usually when you don't have an answer, it means the question was the right one.
Let's see if this starts to work. Yes, it does. Maybe not directly answering that, but I think you are raising exactly the good point, that we all agree that there needs to be some European level guidance, but then the localization, the kind of really local understanding the local environment is such a key. So I don't think there is a simple answer, but I share your concern that we at least as an industry see that there needs to be this kind of a European view, but it really needs to understand also the local perspective, and sometimes even within a country local perspective, because it's not the same soil, it's not the same climate, even within the country. So it's a different solution that you need to adapt.
I'm very glad that you provided this answer, because you are a partner to foresters, being the representative of the wood industry, and we know we fight on prices from time to time, but we know that we have a common interest. And I would like to use your presence. Unfortunately, you are connected to the European Commission, you are the ambassador there, even though you come from a scientific background and role. So, please carry that message. You guys upstairs need to listen to us, because we have to deliver the job. And we can commit to listen to you, because we know that we need a wide variety of opinions to be able to find a solution. So, the fact that nobody wants to answer, whenever I ask, not only here, but yesterday in the debate we had at the French Embassy with the Ministry of Agriculture and many panelists during our General Assembly of the ELO, which was held in Prague, sorry, I said Paris, Prague, about sustainability and European policies, we practitioners never get an answer. to this question of the balance between commonality and subsidiarity. And we don't expect to have a precise answer. It's very difficult. But you have a duty to open that debate, and we have a duty to call for that debate. You will not be able to achieve without us, and we will not be able to achieve anything without you. So, sorry, I'm going beyond my role as moderator, but my heart is beating, and I'm here to ventilate my frustrations. Otherwise, what's the point? Yeah. So, yeah, please. Yeah.
I can react shortly. Finding the right balance between giving a direction without being prescriptive is always a difficult exercise, which from my point of view works only if it's based on trust. And I think that's where we have to make a step forward. Trust between the owners and the policymakers, between citizens, which are becoming in some part of the society polarized towards extreme, let's say, vision on protection of nature. You cannot cut a tree, things like that. So it's still a matter of rebuilding this trust. As I was saying before, I think that the opportunity is there now because we are facing an emergency. Generally, a society, when it's facing an emergency, ideally, it should break these barriers and go for a higher trust.
Thank you. I'll take you on your word. As I mentioned, we fight from time to time on wood prices and so forth, but we truly experience every day how important in today's crisis the solidarity of the whole sector has become. And we have from farm to fork, but we also have from forest to furniture. It's the same solidarity. So I'm very keen to have the perspective of our colleague from Stora Enso. I'm also keen because, being French, I have to, make a comment on the fact that forestry is not only a man's word anymore. And I'm glad that we have many ladies in the room and that we have at least one lady in the panel. So you're most welcome, Mrs. Pirin. And could you give us your perspective at Stora Enso on the future of forests and forestry and the sector in climate change scenario?
I can talk about some points of it, and it's happy to be in the panel and happy to be part of this dialogue. It's such an important topic. So being from the industry, I can maybe provide the point of view how we utilize this wood that is grown in the forest and why it's important for climate change mitigation and everyone in Europe, why this should be actually everyone's topic. Because when we think about the forest sector and the products that we bring to the market, so maybe it's not furniture, maybe it's actually carbon storage that we are talking about. In our case, walls, big elements that store a lot of carbon. So it's part of the solution to fight the climate change that we can have as a sector. So really this transition to circular bioeconomy that we need, it's so clear, and it's kind of the whole intention of the Green Deal. And then it's funny how it sometimes can be kind of having mixed messages within the Green Deal in EU from this perspective. But basically how we see it is that the forest-based renewable products that we bring to the market, they kind of have a threefolded climate benefit. First of all, of course, the forest, when it grows, it sequestrates carbon from the atmosphere. Then in the product, we are basically storing the carbon there for its long lifetime, or then the recycling rounds. And then maybe what we are not really thinking about, but the substitution effect. And I know this gets a lot of criticism, but we're talking about replacing plastics that are oil-based. We're talking about having walls out of mass timber instead of concrete. So it's a huge impact that we can have when we are utilizing this renewable raw material in a beneficial way. So very much it's all needs to be based on sustainable forest management so that we have more of this raw material, that there is this cycle of utilizing the material and having these climate clever solutions out there and not only fossil based. So there is actually these numbers that I need to cheat and read, but transition to renewable products is important because we could, for example, reduce plastics pollution by 80% by 2040, while lowering greenhouse gas emissions by 25% compared to business as usual, as we are seeing. So that gives you hopefully the kind of justification why it's important to utilize this beautiful raw material from forest and why it really is important. I'm coming from our wood products division, so we are making these building solutions, basically mass timber elements. And I don't know if you know that built environment is actually 38% of global energy-related emissions. And then if we think about construction materials, 10% of all of the global emissions. That's 5 times more than aviation. And people are worried about flying, but why aren't they worried about their construction material? And this is a solution that we have readily available. That's kind of mind-striking, that these bio-based renewable solutions, we have them. It's just a matter of utilizing them in packaging instead of plastic, in construction instead of concrete and steel. And of course, it's, the future will never be one material only. We are not after that either. It really is the, best suited material for best use. So it will be some kind of hybrid solution anyway in the future. But those are maybe some of the things how we can utilize the material and why it's important that we utilize the material. Then I could talk on about forest industry and why we are doing what we do, but maybe I come back to that a little bit later. And maybe Stora Enso is not so world-famous company, but we are a stock-listed company in Sweden and Finland. We employ about 22,000 people globally, majority in Europe. So we are actually a big employer in multiple of European countries. And then if you need to kind of put the context, last year's sales were 10 billion euros. So that's the kind of player that we are in this market, utilizing the wood from different forests for different kind of end uses, from packaging to biomaterials and all the innovative things that we have in the pipeline, and then construction. So multiple uses, multiple different solutions already available, and many that we are investigating.
And this is particularly important now that the latest report by the IPCC, the International Panel for Climate Change, and various other experts in the UK recently have shown that we will not reach 1.5 degrees Celsius, and we will probably not reach 2 degrees Celsius, a limit, unless we invent new technology to take out carbon from the atmosphere. We need to reduce emissions, that's for sure, but we also need to take out emissions from the existing stock. And the only machine that works is trees, for now. And we sense that we're a bit frustrated again. As I said, I'm here to ventilate my frustrations, hopefully your frustrations. In the debate, when the debate is driven by emotions, and emotions are important to motivate people, we hear too much about trying to find the one ultimate solution that will solve everything. And we don't find enough space to talk about how we can postpone the problem. Because people think that if we postpone the problem, we avoid the problem. That does not have to be true. It can be true. There's a risk that it is true. But we also know that we need time to increase the wood content in construction. The technologies are there, but they need to be deployed. We need time to store carbon in the energy system, back in the energy system, to compensate for the emissions that they create and so forth. So the value of a tree, of a forest, of the forestry sector and of the furniture is also in giving us the time to develop the new solutions to take out carbon more than only through trees. Am I talking rot, or what do you think? And meanwhile, please, I will pass on the floor to the audience in a tick, so please prepare your questions.
Should I start? I don't think it's even buying time. It's actually already, because it's going to be so many different solutions and applications that are needed. So I think you are already kind of mentioning the solutions, but then in addition, we will need the technology of carbon capture that we are developing and getting even more. But exactly, it's the growing trees that kind of absorb the emissions. So that kind of, if we would not plant more, and you kind of need to take something away to plant more, we wouldn't have that sink in that sense. So, yeah.
Thank you. I see that Mr. Ulrich still has his hand risen. I don't know if it's because you want to react or because you left it there. Should I give you the floor?
Do you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you very much. I wanted just to point one element. We are dreaming in order to store more carbon, but the problem is that the more it will get hotter and drier, we will produce less carbon. Our forests will not be able to produce more carbon. We are facing this already now. We have already observed in France that our productivity, overall productivity of the forests in the last years was decreasing. Just this point.
I can confirm that practically that in our forest where we have been, as I said, many generations now promoting moving away from monoculture, spruce, to mixed, the only thing that grows spontaneously is spruce. And that ash is sick, pines are sick, and so forth. So it's a tough one. It's a tough question. I will now pass the floor to the mic to the floor. Sorry, we have a lady with a microphone. So please talk in the microphone and please kindly mention who you are, so that we have a personal discussion.
Dobrý den, moje jméno je Marta Urbanová.
Marta Urbanová. I'm a forest manager. I work for the Archbishop's forests in the city of Olomouc. I'm on maternity leave, so I don't have my uniform at this moment. I'd like to ask our colleague from Stora. In the Czech Republic, we have quite conservative people. That means that it's very difficult to change the mindset and to change the paradigm in forest management. But we need to change the paradigm and change the mindset, because there are huge changes in front of us. So what I'm trying to say is that here in the Czech Republic, we often hear that there's demand for spruce. So do you think that that will apply in your case in Stora Enso? Or what do you plan for the upcoming 80 years? Can we stop being afraid that if we have mixed forests with various types of trees, nobody will show demand for that? So can we calm down based on your experience, or will you tell us that you are able to process any kind of tree, any kind of wood in whatever volume, or what is in front of us in wood management?
Okay, thank you for the question. Here in Czech, for example, we have 2 different sawmills and a huge expansion ongoing actually to have a CLT mill here. For that, we mainly utilize conifer, so spruce is perfect. That would be nice. So if that was the question, that would be the simple answer. That's the volume that we are currently investing in, having a mill here and utilizing. So yeah.
Pardon, ale ten už mi tady do budoucna.
But yes, but we're not going to grow spruce in the future in the same volumes. That is not the plan. So that's why I'm asking whether you are getting ready for the future and what strategy your company will choose, because the assortment or the variety of wood that is available at this moment will not be available in these volumes in 10 years from now.
Okay, so we were lost in translations. Good. There is a lot of research ongoing on multiple, and of course, as an industry, we are utilizing many species for this kind of mass timber construction. Here, the conifer species are at the moment the maturity, and there have been tests with different species, but they are not maybe on the industrial scale feasible, at least at the moment. But of course, that's also what, being company our size, there is all the time innovation and research ongoing, and really also this resilience and adaptation is super important. So in that sense, I wouldn't worry. There is also other mills and other end solutions where you have the mix of different species in use. So that would be maybe then more spot on, or hopefully closer to what you were asking for. Maybe I could expand on that one actually about this innovation, because for example, maybe end use that wouldn't come naturally to your mind is textile industry, where we have wood-based materials, and then also something that we are at the moment investing is lignin-based graphite material that will actually end up in a battery industry for accumulators, thinking that we are anyway needing the green transition into electrification. So also the kind of batteries that are key in electrification, they tend to be from quite rare materials and quite heavy environmental impact materials. So that's one element that we are kind of making reality already now, that you can have an element into a battery from forest-based product from lignin, developing it to lignode, and from that there forward. So the industry is innovating, and industry is really looking at what else in a fossil-based we can replace with this renewable material, because that's ultimately our goal, that we provide renewable materials that are replacing fossil solutions.
Maybe from the French perspective, you mentioned a lot of examples of experiments you have in the forest. What can you tell us, Mr. Ulrich, about experiments in the industry or interactions between the forestry and the wood industry to explore maybe new species and how they could be used, or anything that you can tell us about the collaboration beyond forestry towards the wood industry in climate change perspective?
Yes, perhaps not exactly an answer to your questions, but there are many questions from our foresters that are thinking, but what will the wind industry tomorrow do when we have so many different tree species? In fact, when you compare, 30 to 50 years is an eternity for an industry. They have lots of time to experiment in order to adapt their processes to new tree species or to new wood qualities or different new qualities, wood qualities. This is one point. And I think this is the way of being of industry, to be innovative and to find new processes. Second point, when you look back 10 years and when you see what in the last 10 years the wood industry was able to develop in order to use different wood qualities and what they are today able to construct with it, then we can be very optimistic that in the next 30 years, they will be able to use different wood qualities from different tree species. And the third point is that in France, the research and development and scientists have looked to many tree species. If I remember well, there are about 130 or 150 tree species all over the world. And most of those that are most resilient to dry and very hot climates are conifers. So we will not stop to have conifers tomorrow. This will perhaps be less spruce or obvious species, but other species will be planted and will exist. So this is not so negative. We just have to adapt in our ideas that we will not perhaps work with the same or plant the same tree species that we have seen in the last 200 or 300 years.
Tomasz Wyczka wanted to react.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I use the offer of the Mr. Kinski to switch on to the Czech language because my comment will be more precise. It's the comment to the question of Marta Urbanová. My vedeme tady ze Stora Enzo, Česká republika, přátelskou diskuzi o...
Here in the Czech Republic, we are having this friendly debate exactly with Stora Enzo about the future of storage. And I personally would not be afraid at all in terms of what the wood processing industry will be buying from us, in 80 years from now, talking about the more expensive species, for instance. When I look at the development of new technologies and new composite materials based on wood, and I can see this right under my hands at the faculty, I'm definitely not worried, not in the least, that these big companies would actually be unable to respond. Like CLT boards, for instance, are being produced in this particular way, and we're always friendly, challenging them in a friendly way, saying, okay, could you make sure that you use more beech in those CLT boards? It's a matter of just responding in time. It's not a matter of 50 years of development. The companies will simply respond to the different proportions of hardwood being available to them. For instance, starting from 1996, when the MZD boards started to be more represented, this is exactly when the composition of our species composition of our forest started to change. Hardwood and conifers are deciduous trees. So some people may like it less than others, but I don't think it is going to be a problem. I'm definitely not going to be influenced by that. From the point of view of our university, we will simply continue in changing the species structure to make sure our forests can survive the ICP 4.5 scenario. That would be my experience. I would definitely not be worried about the wood processing side of things. Which, by the way, is not to say that spruce, technologically speaking, is the ideal species for wood processing.
Also means that we need to diversify not only the species, but also the cycles, the time cycles. I remember meeting foresters, 50-year-old foresters, who told me that they were taught by their elders as young foresters, you should not have birch in your forest. This is what Czechs call nežádoucí dřevina, unwanted trees. And I say, no, there's no unwanted trees. That word does not exist. Yeah. And if we take birch as a precise example in our forest, we're looking at it as a management goal for many reasons. It's ectodermic. It has a different symbiosis with mushrooms and mycelium. It produces leaves that improve the soil much quicker and much better against acidification. It grows much quicker than spruce, let alone oak or beech. And it also has value as a biomass in 20 years or as furniture in 40 years. And God knows, maybe in 20 years it will already have value as furniture. Yeah? So this idea of diversifying not only the species, but also the time cycles is what we also need help from science on, in particular in terms of actual impact on water retention and soil quality improvement on the ground. Other questions from the floor, please. Here we have a question. Let's let the lady answer first. Yes.
Thank you.
From Worldwide.
Thank you. I am Alžběta Procházková, WWF. I will pose my question in Czech as well. Já jsem se jenom chtěla zeptat, jak vidíte možnosti přirozené...
All right, I've switched to English. Sorry, Czech. What do you think about the potential for natural restoration of the forests under the changing conditions? I'll leave this to you, Tomáš. That's a great question. In particular, from one perspective, I actually did want to talk about it in the morning, but I'm not an expert on agriculture, so I didn't dare. We were talking about the common agricultural policy, etc. And we are sort of considering the idea of having or not a common forestry policy. And I think there's a very clear answer to it. There should not be any common forestry policy. We are using the creative forces of nature, of the mother nature, as we fondly say, while agriculture seems to be more industrialized. And you hit the nail on the head when you mentioned the term natural restorative processes. If you have a dying population of spruce 350 meters above sea level, and all of a sudden the new seeds simply take hold. So simply you can say, okay, I'll just let the species grow, let the individual trees grow. But when you work with the concept of natural restoration, nature-based restoration, it needs to be really location specific. That's what my colleague Mr. Svoboda said. You simply can't do a desk study and write down a law that stipulates this or that. No, we need to let people consider all the factors that play a role at a particular location for their stand. And I'll give you one more example that I came across at the Ministry of the Environment. And we were having this meeting with the Agency for Landscape and Nature Protection. And roughly half of the forests we are responsible for covers the Natura 2000 network. And we have a lot of limestone beach populations. These are the high importance sites. That's the term for these stands. Now, these are the locations where the beaches are dying out, literally right in front of your very own eyes. And then there is hornbeam, linden tree, and oak, and other trees, other species. And we are not allowed to reduce the proportion of beech. So if it goes down from 90%, because originally it was 90%, I have not fulfilled the regulation. But in fact, in terms of restoring natural state of affairs, it would be total nonsense to try and regenerate that proportion of beech because it's simply dying out there. And this may have been stipulated in good faith 25 years ago. It's just the climate dictates otherwise now. And it doesn't really matter whether this is something that was dictated by somebody in Brussels or elsewhere. It doesn't really matter. Which means that nature closer management is not about creating wild forest. It's about making sure that the economic production and biodiversity is sustainable, so that you can go mushroom picking in the autumn, right? Which is the Czech hobby.
But back to the question to natural restoration, I have two comments from my own practice, from my own experience. It is not as slow as it might seem. After 20 years of work with our forests, which was mainly spruce, we have a natural restoration of silver fair, of fair, basically of fair. So 20 years, that's a short period of time, and you can see results. The nature accepts it and works with it. But you need a certain source, which is 7 times 64 meters plot. And we also have to change the way we hunt in the Czech Republic, because we're hunting with the mind of a hunter and not with the mind of a forester. So when we have a French and Czech presidency in the Czech Republic, you need 500 hectares of forest to have a hunting plan and to manage the forest as a hunter. In France, you have no limit. It's enough to have 1 square meter. And the result in our country is a catastrophic result, because we have so much deer and other wild animals in the forest. It's overpopulated, and the nature is under huge pressure, while in France, the foresters cooperate with the hunters, and they naturally maintain the environment. So the gamekeepers with the forest keepers, with the foresters, they cooperate. And the system is very important. So 7 times 64, that's the system. So if there are any ladies that want to join us and try to protect our forests and to come to our forests and hunt, of course, all ladies are welcome. And I'm saying that with a big smile on my face. So maybe 1 or 2 more questions, because we're slowly getting to the end.
This question will be in English.
Neil Streskov from Sweden. It's both a statement and a question and a suggestion. And we all know that we have this climate change that we have been talking, and you all have been talking about it, and you've been talking about different ways of solving it in the forest and how maybe industry will change and so on. And my suggestion is that we should not do the same failure as we have done to a large extent with the cap. We should actually try to find a system where we all satisfy what goals we want, where we want to go, but then also give the landowners and the managers a palette of tools so we can reach the goal, and they will use the tools that they can use or measures that they believe in, because it's a lot easier for somebody who believes in something that they want to accomplish, and they will accomplish it, instead of having strict rules that do this, do that. And then we have forestry that it's changing from northern part of Sweden all the way down to Malta, more or less. And it's so different. And we have been looking up on how we manage our forestry so differently over such a long time. So imposing rules on people, I don't think it will work. And then, how do we now convince our politicians, the Commission, and how do we build the trust and get rid of just using the 180-character way of spreading information, because then we will be either out far to the left or far to the right on the issue. Because everybody, there's not a but, there's not a gray area. But it's usually in the gray area, we actually solve a long-term problem. How do we convince the politicians and the Commission to accept those type of things?
Would anybody of our panelists like to react? All have to react. Well, I will start, and I will be politically incorrect. The reality is that, at least on our side, we have the impression that too often the European Commission officials are not listening. Maybe they have the impression that we are not listening either, so maybe we all have to change. But we certainly have the impression that they are not listening. And they listen to their masters. That's the reality of European politics. That's the real life we live in. And therefore, my suggestion is that we should engage in a dialogue with their masters, which are member states represented in the European Council. And yesterday at the dinner we had at the French embassy and the French presidency, arose an idea from one of our colleagues that we have 3 presidencies, as I mentioned, maybe 4, French, Czech, Sweden, thank you for intervening, and possibly Spain, where forestry is important. If there could be some kind of policy paper, and I think 180 words well written would be sufficient, that would represent the common view of those 3, potentially 4 presidencies through the European Council, maybe the Commission would feel a bit more urge to listen. And I'm sorry if I'm being politically incorrect. Maybe I'm wrong, but this is our experience, and I had to put it on the table. Now that I've said the politically incorrect thing, maybe other people would like to react more diplomatically, or again from the practitioner.
And one perspective to that would be, of course, dialogue. That was already mentioned in the previous panel, being ready for constructive dialogue. And then another word that is always so trendy, but I actually mean this, is value chain collaboration. So actually take different parties of this long and valuable value chain and include in the dialogue. So I think it really is about dialogue with the policymakers, dialogue with the industry, and that's pretty much what we can do. And of course, there are already good examples where it has worked. So now also let's work hard that our value chains are heard also in the future. But it will require a lot of value chain collaboration and really bringing the messages, not only the forest owners, not only us as an industry, also our customers, and then the end consumers even, when we manage to get this kind of a wide chain together.
Yes, absolutely.
Few words. How do we build trust? It's difficult, but I think it's achievable with a combination of dialogue and the right information. Dialogue around facts instead of ideologies. Of course, the Commission speaks with the countries through official organisms. You have the Council, we have the Standing Forestry Committee, and there is where the voices from the countries are coming to the Commission centers. So it's clearly important that you made your voice through that channel. But I don't see alternative specifically to tell the truth. We just have to do it, to be really stubborn on it and go for it. And we have to do it soon, because as our colleague was saying, we are late. I was also mentioning it yesterday, we are late, but not too late. Because if we say we are too late, then we stop to act. That's not the case. We are just late, which means that we have to act fast.
Thank you very much. And in the interest, we have another question from the floor. But before that, in the interest of full disclosure, I have to act responsibility. What my politically incorrect comment, I have to add 2 things. One, it's my opinion. Nothing official from SWOL or ELO. It's my opinion. And it's a free country. And the second one is that actually we don't necessarily have a different frustration when trying to have a dialogue with the Ministry of Agriculture or the Ministry of Environment. So we have to do it, as you said, we have to act, and we have to act at all levels, national, local, and upstairs in Brussels. We have another question from Sweden. Could we have the microphone here? Here. Thank you. Glad to have questions from Sweden, who's taking over presidency of the European Union after the Czech Republic.
That's going to be interesting. Anders Grant, Swedish Landowners Association. We've heard that we need to adapt quickly. It's late already. We need to be fast. But what is the timetable? How fast do we have to do this? Because I think it's a relevant question, because at the same time we hear that we cannot cut down any single tree because we need them as a carbon sink. But on the other hand, if we want to have a quick adaptation of the forest, we need to cut down the forest and replant. So how do we consolidate these two different aspects? Because I find them as a practitioner with a very slow-growing forest in the northern parts of Finland, I find it difficult how to combine these two. And just an observation regarding community and subsidiarity principle, I think we should follow the money. If we have a community-based solution, then the cost should be on community level as well. Whereas if we have subsidiarity principles, we should have the costs at the lower level. Because my experience is that if you have a decision on a national level and it comes with cost as well for the national level, it tends to be fewer decisions on the national level and more subsidiarity.
An answer on the rhythm of climate change from the panelists?
It's a question about the timetable. No timetable for this transformation of forest, because this is the same like we discussed before about the using of natural regeneration. The timetable is different by owner, by state of the forests in mountains, in lowlands, etc. It's like Konstantin Kinski said, on his property on which the spruce is dominated three species, 700-800 meters above sea level. Okay, the timetable for this property is 40-50 years to transform all the property to the mixed forests if the scenario RCP 4.5 is reality. If it is faster, the timetable is over. And this is very different. And the reaction of owners or leading foresters have to be local. This is from my point of view. And I have a next comment to the former question about the dialogue. Of course, we are discussing, we are open many dialogues. EU Commission and national ministries and landowners organization and scientists and NGOs, etc. But from my point of view, it is here missing the main group of the people. They are the foresters practitioners, which are not invited in this dialogue, because they are daily in the forest and they are making the dots on the trees. They select the trees and they are the people who really change the state of the forest. They really daily change the tree species composition. They really changed the structural diversity of the forests, but these people are absolutely out of this dialogue. It is possible to see in this this EU Strategy 2030. It is 27 pages of the text, but only 2 short paragraphs about the transfer of practical knowledges between the practitioners across Europe. Only 2 short paragraphs. It is 10 pages about the necessity of next scientific and monitoring systems, etc. But I have to say, only these people can change the forest. This is the theoretical forum, which is good, but if the next step is not done, it means if these ideas are not connected with these people who daily have the responsibility for the timber, for the workers, etc., I think these timetables are absolutely only the science fiction. No, fiction, not science.
I can give you our practical answer to that on the ground. We already have 1.3 something global increase in temperatures, which means in reality in our forest 2 degrees. We also know it's at least as likely as unlikely, 50%, probably 2/3 chance that the next half degree, the 1.5 degree global warming threshold will be breached within this decade. And we probably know that we will be much closer to 2 degrees Celsius than to 1.5 if in the next 10 years, not 20, 30, 40, in the next 10 years, all the measures that have been promised in COP26 and COP25 are delivered in full and in time. Is it going to happen? Is COP27 going to deliver additional measures to compensate for the fact that in those things that have been promised, there is so-called also hot air? So we have literally no time. And the future starts today. The only good thing of that, and if I may conclude this discussion, because time is also running out, is that it reminds me of what the founder of the European Union said, Jean Monnet, who founded the Communauté Européenne du Charbon et l'Acier, pooling the tools for war just after the Second World War, which was steel and coal, in a common base that was the start of the European Union, the basis for peace for our European project. And we know how important it is now. Jean Monnet said a very simple thing. Human beings only accept change when they see the need for it. And they only see the need for it in times of crisis. Let's use this crisis. We are all in it together, and the future starts today. The problems of our generation needs to be solved by our generation. And I really like what you said about trust. It's about engagement. And engagement is two-sided. One is that the politicians with a big P and the officials who carry the voice of the people through national organizations, national member states, and at the European level need to trust us. And we, as landowners, need to prove that we are responsible. Engagement is a combination of trust on one side and responsibility on the other side. And we hope as ELO, in particular through this discussion today, that we can prove, and also through the many things we do on the ground, such as the Soil Award to promote soil quality, the Bee Award to promote biodiversity through one particularly sensitive insect, the many studies we have conducted on large fauna, on wolves and how you manage them, on small fauna, and how you use hunting to promote biodiversity in the forest, through the wildlife estate, which is about how to manage forests in a way that promotes sustainable hunting, and the many, many, many initiatives we have across Europe in working together with universities to bring science inside the debate. And as the colleague from ONF said, to test and learn, hopefully we will deliver a future that we can be proud of for our children. I thank you all very much. I thank our panelists for a fruitful, thoughtful, open discussion. I'm glad that we have somewhat a diversity of opinion as well. I think we spoke the truth. I'm sure we spoke from the heart, and hopefully we can combine warm hearts, cool heads, and clever hands to build a good future for ourselves and for our children. Thank you very much. I will now thank the panelists, and I will ask 3 people to come on stage with me to conclude the forum with a short last message, last announcement on an initiative that ELO is promoting. So if I can ask Thierry Delescaille, Secretary General of the ELO, Emmanuel Mikosh, who is the production manager of the forum, and Mrs. von, sorry, I will mispronounce your name, Miss Wildlich, sorry, from Tetra Pak, to come to the floor and to tell us a word about what's coming in the future. Emmanuel?
thank you very much. We will be very brief. Yeah, we will come together. I think that will be easier. And we are just waiting for a four-person arriving also on the screen in addition. Alberto Arroyo from IUCN. He's just finishing one of the meetings taking place in Brussels because we have also the European Parliament meeting, so that's why we're trying to be on time with everything. And he will be also joining our very short declaration. But I think that first we would like to say that it's very important to be here for the regional event because, of course, we had our big annual conference in March in Brussels. That was very important for us. But then, of course, when we are speaking about the French presidency, the Czech presidency, then the Swedish presidency, it's crucial for us to be in the regional countries, to come and to speak to you, to really exchange with you. So thank you once more also for being with us here today. Also, this is very important to say that as the forum, of course, everything about resilient food, agriculture, nature, biodiversity, it's the core of the mission of the Forum for the Future of Agriculture. This is stated in the name, of course, of the Forum. But as this discussion showed, it's also crucial to have more topics linked to forestry. And of course, everything linked to forest-based economy and forest eco-schemes are very important. And this is why we have also taken the decision as the Forum and the strategic partners to have more discussion on forestry, to have even a special subgroup, subdivision to really emphasize the need to have more discussion on forestry. And I'm very happy to have with me on stage ELO, Thierry Descailles. So this is one of the co-founders of the Forum. We have just on screen also Alberto Arroyo from IUCN, so one of the strategic partners of the Forum, and also the new partners joining to support us, so Sabine from Tetra Pak. So if I may, I will start with Sabine, okay, for a short statement, and then we will pass the word to Alberto, and we'll finish with Thierry.
Yes, thank you, Emmanuel. And I can just say that we really highly value that we can join and have the opportunity to join this new forest platform that is just being launched here. As you may know, Tetra Pak is a leading global provider of food packaging that is mainly made from wood-based fibers. So we are actually another part of the supply chain here, right? Which is the end user. And as such, we are really convinced that we can only reach these ambitions that we just have discussed, the environmental ones, the social ones, and also the economic ones, in a truly joint effort of all actors of the value chain. And so therefore, we are really looking forward to contribute to the debate in the next months. And I would just like to thank Janusz Potocznik this morning, and I hope we take his approach really by our hearts. We have to put the critical questions on the table. And then we have to see and to define where we can reconcile this very polarized discussion and where we can come up with very concrete actions. I hope we have news in the next local in Sweden, exactly. And so thank you very much.
So I will pass the word to Alberto.
Hello, and sorry for joining only virtually today. And I see anyway myself in the screen, I see that I'm the biggest in the room, which is always nice. Anyway, I just want to thank very much to start with the ELO, Thierry, and all colleagues working on the Forum for the Future of Agriculture. We became a strategic partner of the Forum for the Future of Agriculture very recently. We believe in dialogue. We believe in the need to discuss among each other with very different points of view to try to achieve all the big challenges that we have in front of us. So this is environment, this is food, and this is many other issues that are conflicting, if you want, or trying not necessarily always going in the same direction. So when it comes to forest, unfortunately, the discussion is not that easy at the moment, as we know well. So any effort to try to advance in this direction, to try to make the things better, can only be welcome. And from our side, from IUCN, we are always into the dialogue situation, and that's what we think that we can contribute. So we are looking forward to see this expansion of the work in the direction of forest also from the FFA, and we are definitely happy to contribute and to see also the work with other additional partners such as Tetra Pak and others that are also entering the discussion now. Looking forward for the work. Thank you very much.
So from my part, of course, I will thank all the partners for their intervention, but there is one thing I will really add. We launched a forum 15 years ago, coming from the conclusion that there was no place, no room where we could have an open debate without any restriction among industry, green NGOs, actors, farmers, foresters, where we can meet, we try to mitigate our difference, and we can try to develop altogether solutions. Well, I have to say that a lot of progress has been done in terms of agriculture, and we always were thinking about doing something about forestry. And you know, yellow is for farmers and foresters, and it became obvious that with the current debate, with the urgencies of the different crises, we have to sort out altogether, not only one, because we have a food crisis, we have a climate crisis, we have a biodiversity crisis, and we have to find solutions which are sustainable, which means, and I think Constantin has been underlining that we need to respect economic, social, and environmental criteria. Well, it's a challenge, so we need all of you, you the foresters, you the industry, you the scientists, you the Greens, the NGOs, the people conveying ideas to all together find and develop solutions. Otherwise, we will lose that debate. It's crucial, so we need you. And I'm very happy to tell you that with the support of our think tank, with the support of Janès, of course, of also Franz Fischler, who was our previous chairman of the forum, and all the one working very closely with the forum, we decide and we are committed to have the same level of debate for the forestry part of our world. We are farmers and foresters. I'm the two together. I'm a rural man, I'm a countryside man, and I cannot divide my interest. We are all the same. It's crucial that we find solutions. Now, I will particularly would like to thank the Dean of the University for having welcomed us in this magnificent location. I also want to thank Constantin for the moderation he did, and I think your colleague moderator is not anymore here, but she did a great job this morning, so a big hug to her also. I have to thank all the partners, and I don't have to forget the traductors, because they did a great job. I have tested them, and I could understand, not Czech, but I could understand French and English. And also our cameraman, and a bit sorry for you, but I think you are doing with one hand a good job too. So thank you. Having said so, thanks a lot to all of you. We will meet soon. We will have the program. I know also that our partners have their own program. I know that Alberto is terribly involved in all the stories. I recommend you, in terms of sustainability, the study he has been publishing about the different form of agriculture. It's an excellent study. We have been invited to have a look at it and to support him. But there is quality at the level of industry, at the level of the NGOs, at the level of the producers. Use this quality, and I wish you all a very good evening. And once again, thank you to our Czech host and also to the friends from the GRC. And I have to say that Czech Republic is a good country where there are ideas, and when you, as you say, we are allowed to have an open debate. Thank you.
And as we say in the Czech Republic, lesu zdar. White Mines Hall. À très bientôt. Thank you.